I will tell why case documentation is important, what case documentation is, and how to write an excellent case study. I will start with a situation. Suppose an election officer somewhere, an election official has solved a problem. He has solved a problem in a way that had never been solved before. Maybe the election official figured out how to register voters who do not have any residence, any address, any fixed address. Maybe someone has found a solution, sort of a mobile polling station that reaches nomadic communities. Or someone has figured out how to catch errors in ballot counting before it reaches crisis proportions. The solution works and the voters are served. But then there is no documentation, there is no structured account, and there is no transferable knowledge. The insight or the reform dies maybe by with the rotation of the personnel, with the change of the government, or with the passage of the time. Or even if it does not die, the practice may remain confined to a particular locality. So now this is the disaster that case documentation is designed to prevent. Fortunately, the problems and the solutions I have just discussed exist in reality. The solutions exist in reality. They exist because they have been documented. They exist because there are laws, there are policies, and there are established practices. For instance, the solution to the problem of voters with no fixed address was first incorporated in Britain's Representation of the People Act 2000, which allows homeless person to declare a familiar shelter or a familiar street corner as their registered location. Later on, this solution was adopted by several countries in their own ways: Australia, Canada, France. Solution to the second problem of reaching the most remote communities was first incorporated by Australia's Election Commission in its remote mobile polling program in 1996. Similarly, the solution to the problem of catching errors in ballot counting before they become crisis was developed by Professor Philip Stark, which is a statistical method. Philip Stark is a professor at University of California, and this method was adopted by some of the Western United States, Western states of the United States in 2017. So these are the examples of well documented solutions which are available to any election management body who needs them across the world. Now I will tell another situation which makes the same point, that the case documentation is most consequential. But with an example where documentation was actually not done and the consequences. Kenya held elections in 2013. On the election day, the electronic system broke down. The lesson was clear and obvious that first you need to test your technology and you must always have a backup plan, plan B. But the lesson was never formally written down. The lesson was never built into the law, and the lesson never made its way into the procedures. 4 years later, in 2017, Kenya held elections again. Results transmission system failed again, and the Supreme Court had to cancel the presidential result. Same country, same failure. Lesson existed in 2013, but it was just not documented. So it had to be learned twice, obviously at enormous cost to the country's democratic stability. Only after 2017, the backup procedures were written into the law. And in 2022, again there was technical disruption and the backup procedures were required and they were there and they worked. So you see, the step 6 is consequential, very important. You have studied, you have seen, you have learned, you have talked about, debated, discussed step 1 through 5, which are acts of discovery, defining scope, mapping evidence, screening cases, engaging stakeholders, and conducting comparative analysis. These steps give us understanding. The step 6 decides whether that understanding remains private intelligence or become permanent, portable, and transferable global public knowledge. So in a way, step 6 is the method by which India's chairship promises become real, by which India's chairship would be able to fulfill all the overarching objectives that it has committed to achieve. Case documentation gives a concrete shape to democracy's deliverables in specific jurisdictions, under specific contexts, under specific conditions. So this case documentation provides, all of you are working on this.
Please continue.
So case documentation provides documented examples of model standards as well as best practices. And these are going to be global knowledge products that election management bodies can understand, can recognize, can adopt, and can also adapt to their circumstances. And this aspect gives the Election Commission of India an opportunity to engage with election management bodies around the world, to strengthen international partnerships, and to accelerate the implementation of model standards and best practices. So you can see that this documentation is the, or I would say, one of the most important part of the entire project. So if we have complex multi-jurisdictional comparative foundings, what case documentation does is that it converts those findings into forms which can be used by the officials across the world. They can read it, evaluate, and act upon it. So, having said this, what is it? What are the features that make what are the features that make a case study excellent? This is important because a poorly written case study is not merely unhelpful, but it is also actively harmful. Because when a case study presents an electoral innovation as successful without adequately examining the context, without adequately explaining the conditions under which that reform was implemented, without explaining the preconditions under which that particular policy, practice, or reform can be transferred, can be implemented in a different situation, different context, then it becomes a template for misadventure. Because administrators in other countries will try to apply it without understanding the conditions, without understanding the context. And they will try to implement it in incompatible circumstances and then wonder why it fails. And this is not hypothetical risk. This is one of the most persistent problem when we try to diffuse locally designed policies, locally designed programs, locally designed reforms on a global scale. The World Bank's foundational guidance on case study methodology captures this very precisely. It says that a case study is compelling because it is vivid and because it is context specific. Now, this vividness of a case study creates an impression as if it is internationally applicable. It creates an illusion, which is a pitfall that a rigorous research methodology must resist. This is why the step 6 has 8-element journey, which you all know: context, problem, intervention, implementation, design, results, evidence-based, lessons, transferability. Each element performs a distinct function. Let us go through all these 8 elements. First is the context.